Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
Hello and welcome to The Money Factor. I'm Richard Naylor, your host. Our guest today, and we're bringing him back again, is Dr. Thomas Denham from Careers in Transition. Today we're going to be talking about another part of the job search process, the career test, the aptitude test. How do you figure out what you want, where you want to go, what job do you want to do? So I want to welcome Tom back to the show.
Thank you for having me.
We've probably done 5 to 10, I don't even know. We've done everything from resumes to, well, this is probably the most sophisticated topic.
I promise to behave myself today.
For the first time. No, I'm just kidding. I've never really understood the career test. I mean, in a way, it's a silly question, but when we talk about at the library, what are we going to do for people who are unemployed? And you always think of resume critiquing, right at the beginning, but people come in and they might not know what to put on the resume because they don't know what they want.
Right.
So what is a career test? How does that fit into the whole job search?
Okay. Well, I'm going to walk back and tell you the 3 stages of the career development process, which are self-assessment, that's where the career testing comes in, right? Career exploration, and then action plan. So there's one question that we're trying to answer in each stage. The first question in self-assessment is, who am I? Then, where am I going for career exploration? And then finally, with action plan is how do I get there?
I like it.
The action plan is either do a job search, go back to school, or start a business.
Okay.
So
and that's the last one.
Sometimes when people get laid off, they enter this period where, one, they have a lot of emotional trauma from that. And once they address that, then they can move forward with their plans. And they may be saying to themselves, you know, this is an opportunity for me to reassess. I really don't know what I want at this stage in my career.
And they probably should be doing that if they're not.
They should be doing it all the time.
Okay.
Or they should make an appointment with me once a year for an annual checkup. That's what I tell my clients. It's like, once you've worked with me, you need to come back once a year, get your resume, do goal setting, do some assessments to make sure we're on the right track. You know, don't call me up 10 years later and say that you were off the track. So it's very much like going to your doctor.
No, I want to keep that in context because to me that's the foundation of everything we're doing.
And it's the hardest part, the self-assessment.
So if you were in grade school, maybe even not in grade school, people are asking you, what do you want to be when you grow up?
Right.
And you start saying, I don't know, garbage collector, scientist, one of the two, I can't decide.
That's an excellent question, and it's often unfair for us to ask somebody who's an adolescent, what do you want to be when you grow up, get a straight answer, and expect that that's what they're going to do for the rest of their lives. As we know, most of us were asked that question, and we are not doing those particular jobs. Most people, when they're in adolescence and in college, and now they're saying research studies indicate that adolescence is going until about 25 or 26, where they're experimenting, exploring careers, they just are occupationally illiterate. So some of these career tests can be very helpful in giving them a sense of all the options that are available. Now, when I was in high school, I took this test called the ASVAB test, and it was a vocational test. And it said something like, I think it said something like television. So here we are. Now, I'm not doing that full time, but this is something that I enjoyed, and it said a couple other things. And then it said some things that were just completely off the wall that I would never consider. That's why in self-assessment, what I do for my clients is I do career counseling. So I'm listening to them, I'm asking them questions about their educational background and their professional background and their personal background. Then I'm administering some self-assessment tests, which we'll talk about, and then I offer a questionnaire. So I do that in the first appointment, then they come back in the second appointment, and we review all the results.
Okay.
So what we're doing is we're casting out this huge net to look at all the possible career options, to make sure that every stone has been unturned, and then we're going to narrow down those choices.
Based on?
based on these assessments.
Okay.
So it's kind of like fishing. If you cast out a wide net, you're going to get
Maybe a few tin cans.
You're going to get some tin cans. You're going to get some garbage. You're going to get a boot. You're going to get a life preserver, and then you're going to get a mackerel, and you're also going to get some carp.
So you're warm now.
Yeah. So, and you're also going to get a swordfish, and you're going to get other fish. So what you have to do is you have to haul in that net and throw out all the garbage, things that don't make sense. But there's a tendency that when somebody takes one of these tests, they treat it like gospel. So it says, Richard Naylor should be a florist. And so what I hear from people is, oh yeah, I took that test 10 years ago and it said I should be a florist. So they tend to throw out the baby with the bathwater.
Because they're laughing at it and say, come on, that's
right.
not
There's
what
no
I want.
validity to this. This is just the stupidest thing. Now, for example, when I took one of the self-assessments, the strong interest inventory, which I continue to use, it said I should be a flight attendant. Okay. Now, I have a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, and a doctoral degree.
I'm not sure that's going to fit that.
Probably not, but you know what? I would love to be a flight attendant. I think that would just be so much fun. I would work for Southwest Airlines, and I would just have a great time. All the passengers would be tremendously satisfied. But that option has come and gone.
Well, for one thing, you might not decide that that's enough money.
Right. There may be other factors. Money, time, being away from your family, training, education, experience, things of that nature.
Okay, so we've got it in context with the job. It's really important. How do you decide if you should take it? I mean, who should take it? We have people who have jobs who might think, well, I'm not sure that this is what I want to do.
Right. That's the person that should take it.
Okay.
So the three questions are, who am I, where am I going, how do I get there? So when somebody contacts me, I listen to them first for about 20 minutes. And I get a sense of where they are in this cycle. If somebody calls me and says, I want to come in, I'm applying for this job, I want a resume and cover letter critique, that's one appointment. They don't need to go through the process. They're very focused. There's not a lot of people that do that. Most people can't answer that second question, where am I going? If I ask them, where are you going? They'd say, well, I'm kind of thinking about this, I'm kind of thinking about that. They're not clear. And I tell them, you've got to focus first and then do your job search, and the number one job search strategy is networking. So if they can't answer the second question, where am I going? It's because they haven't answered the first one.
Okay.
Who am I?
Right.
And in self-assessment,
that's where we're at. Right?
That's where we're at. And with self-assessment, you're looking at 4 things about a person.
You're anticipating the question perfectly. Yeah, so I was wanting to know what kind of questions are there and what are they looking at?
Sure. The things that we're trying to uncover to develop a strong base of self-assessment is someone's skills, their values, their interests, and their personality traits. So skills are things you're good at, your core competencies, your abilities.
Now, how does that fit in with what you might have learned?
That could be knowledge as well.
That's not quite what you're talking about.
Right. Skills are like
good at.
What you're naturally good at, which is different from interests. Interests are things I like to do that I'm passionate about. So you could be very skilled at something, but you hate it, right? And so you can't truly be satisfied by doing that type of occupation. Then there's values. Values are things that we hold important. And your career should be values-driven. And unfortunately, people are driving their career with other priorities that are not values-driven, and then they wind up in my office.
Now, we're only on the second part, and I'm going to ask you, at the risk of losing track here, so keep me on track. Give us a couple ideas of what you mean by values.
Values could be family, security, respect, money, power, fame, stability, security, and sometimes and they're competing.
Okay. Right.
Sometimes. So if somebody is wealth-oriented and they're looking at these types of jobs over here that tend to be high pay, they also tend to be high stress, high level of education, and many hours.
And maybe very competitive.
And maybe be very competitive. That's exactly right. And then over here you have this need to pick up your kids at 3:15 at the bus stop. Well, you have to reconcile which of those values is important to you. For example, another conflict could be Richard Naylor wants to be a college professor. He doesn't have a PhD, but he's married and he has 2 young children.
So how am I going to afford
How am I going to
the
afford
time?
this? And that's time away from my family, which is also a priority. So I wouldn't tell somebody that you can't be a college professor and get a PhD. I would say if you want to get a PhD, it's going to take you 5 to 7 years to get this. Are you willing to make the sacrifice in order to achieve that goal?
Realistic.
Right. So when we're doing these assessments, they're going to generate specific job options, and then you have to continue to narrow them down based on your values.
So we got skills. Now we have values.
Values, interests,
Interests. Okay.
and then personality traits.
Okay.
So, for example, I'll just give you one assessment. One assessment I use is called the Campbell Interest and Skill Survey. And what it does, it measures just that, your interests and skills. And so, in the first part of the assessment, it will ask you questions that are based on your interests. In the second part, it's skills. So it'll say things like, would you like to fly a plane across Alaska? And it'll say either strongly like, indifferent, strongly, slightly dislike, and then dislike.
And vertigo.
And, and so it's a bubble test, and you fill out these things. Then you go to the skills section, and it'll say, estimate how good you would be at these activities.
Okay,
so
good.
if you've never flown a plane across Alaska, you would say, how would you like to fly a plane? Do you think you would be good at flying a plane across Alaska? And then you would say, expert, good, fair, poor, or I have no skills. So you
Separate
would
the
have to,
dream from what's possible.
right. So you're right. So sometimes, it scores it, and there are 7 what they call orientations. There's influencing, organizing, helping, creating, analyzing, producing, and adventuring. So if you took a pie chart, it's trying to divide up the world of work into these 7 categories. And then what it's going to do is it's going to computer score your results. And then you have a printout where there's a black diamond that represents your interests and a white diamond that represents your skill. Okay? So for, let's say it's the influencing orientation, which tends to be business careers. If your interest is high and your skill is high, which means I like to do those things and I think I'm good at those, then it's going to be classified as a pursue.
Okay.
Those are the highest scores. Okay? If the interest is high and the skill is lower, that is a develop.
Okay.
Which means with more education, training, and experience, you could bring up that white diamond higher and fall into the high range, and that would turn into a pursue. So, for example, if you really liked counseling and psychology, but you didn't think you were very good at it, it might be that you've never had that kind of training or you don't have a master's degree or PhD. So with that's a possibility as a career choice.
Okay.
The other one is called explore, where your interest is low, but your skill is high. That's the one where I'm really good at these things, but I'm dispassionate about it. That's explore. And then the other one is avoid.
Okay. So that's the worst.
Avoid is when your interest and skills are low, you stay away from those kind of activities.
Okay. So that's one test.
One test. There's another one.
Go ahead.
So I use the Campbell Interest and Skill Survey. The other one I use is called the Strong Interest Inventory. Now, it just measures your interests, and it organizes them into 6 orientations or themes. And the themes are realistic, artistic, investigative, social, conventional, and one more which I have completely forgotten, but it will come to me. So what happens is you go through this list, and it'll give you specific jobs, then specific activities, and again you score either strongly like, strongly dislike, or somewhere in between. Computer scores it, you get a nice printout, it's all in color, and it will tell you what are your top 3 orientations. So your orientations could be social, enterprising, and conventional. Social being helping, conventional being data-driven office practices, and conventional. And then enterprising would be more business-oriented, entrepreneurship, marketing, sales, things like that. So underneath each of those orientations are specific jobs. So you're starting from general career fields, both with the Campbell and the strong interest inventory, and then you're getting more specific occupations. The reason why I use those two, in addition to several other ones, is I want to see patterns.
Right.
So sometimes the Campbell doesn't pick up on things that the strong does, and sometimes they pick up on both. So if I'm using the Campbell, the strong, and then the Myers-Briggs, which is a personality assessment, as opposed to these, which are interest and skill surveys, if I'm seeing patterns in all these areas, plus I'm hearing it during the counseling appointment, plus I pick it up when they submit the questionnaire, now we're going with somebody.
Now you
somewhere.
think this sounds like it's got a good chance of being correct.
Right. There's some validity and reliability to it. The problem is when somebody takes one of these assessments, either does it online or there's no dialogue or working with somebody, and they say, you know, Richard Naylor should be a plumber, they kind of throw the baby out with the bathwater. There's no validity to any of the other choices.
Right.
And that's why one of the things...
Because while there could be a lot of things I like about plumbing, it might, for some reason, not be fully satisfying to me.
That's right. And the other thing we have to emphasize is that, you know, you can't get to the Olympics by yourself. So sometimes these tests are dangerous in that people put so much faith into these tests, and some of the tests you can't even take unless you're qualified, like the Campbell and the Strong and certainly the Myers-Briggs. You have to be certified in order to administer those things. Right. There's plenty of things online, and there's plenty of things that are online that they're trying to sell you that are not based in a lot of research. The Myers-Briggs...
I started to bring up a book to show you, and after looking at it, I thought, this looks very childish. There were a lot of things in there that I thought, oh, this just looks like somebody's trying to make some money, and they came up with a lot of lists.
One of the other assessments I use is the Myers-Briggs. Now that's a classic. It's classic. It's the most reliable and valid self-assessment on the market. And I actually went to Florida to the Center for Applications of Psychological Type. I had to take a week-long course and a 2-hour exam. There's a 400-page manual that goes with it. So people do their dissertations on this, and it's a pretty serious assessment. It's different from the Campbell and the Strong in that it's a personality assessment, and it measures 4 aspects of your personality. So when you were born, you had preferences for the way of doing things. So the first preference is where you get your energy from.
Okay, external, internal.
Yes, you're either an extrovert or an introvert. So I'm an extrovert. I get my energy from working and dealing with other people. An introvert gets their energy from within themselves.
Is it possible to do both?
You use both like your 2 hands. But what hand do you write with?
Right.
Okay, so if you put down your pen, there's going to be a preference for picking it up with your right hand. There are going to be times where you pick it up with your left hand. So when you're going to be the most satisfied when you're working within your preference. So if you take your pen and you write with your right hand all day long, that's going to feel natural. So I'm going to ask you right now, Richard. I want you
with my left hand?
I want you to put that in your left hand.
I did.
Okay. Now I want you to sign your name on that sheet of paper.
It's going to look worse than with my right hand.
Okay. So. Now
oh my gosh!
You tell me
this
how that.
Terrible.
You tell me how that feels. You couldn't even do it. No, yeah, you can do it.
I know.
The thing is, you can do it, but it just feels uncomfortable.
In grade school, when I smashed my right finger, and I got okay at it.
You can do it. It feels extremely uncomfortable, and it doesn't turn out pretty.
No, it doesn't.
So that's what it's like when we're using our opposite preference. So when you know the power of this, there are times where you're going to have to use that opposite preference. So for example, as an extrovert, I'm very comfortable going to networking events, meeting people, Chamber of Commerce, and that kind of thing. That's where I get my energy from. If I go to my office and I don't have any clients for the day, I have to introvert all day long.
Makes you tired?
It makes me tired. That's exactly right. Now, an introvert, on the other hand, would say, "Oh, yippee! They would want to work in my office with the door closed."
They're not sucking my energy away.
Right. As soon as I told the introvert that we're going to go to a Chamber of Commerce event where there's going to be 500 people, they're not appealing at all.
White.
So we use both, and when you know that you have to use both, you can switch hands. So for example, if I have a day where I don't have clients, I go into introvert mode, and I know that that's what I need. If I have a Chamber of Commerce event in the morning where I'm meeting and networking with a lot of people, that gives me enough energy to go through the whole day if I have to introvert.
So that was two things.
Okay, that's the first.
That was just one.
Yeah, there's three others.
So that's like a one way or the other on that
right,
one.
yes. It's, again, like your hands.
Okay.
You use both, but you prefer one or the other. And there's this other thing called the PCI, which is the Preference Clarity Index. It determines how clear you prefer something. So you can either have a slight, a moderate, a clear, or very clear. Now, I have a clear preference for extroversion. So when I was born an extrovert. That was my preference. But so I'm going to pick up that pen 9 times out of 10 with my right hand, my extrovert hand. Somebody might have a slight preference. That's sort of like being ambidextrous.
Okay.
Okay. They're always going to prefer one, but it's not a clear preference. So that's called the PCI. The second preference is your preference for information, how you get information. So I'm an S or a sensing type. I take my information in from my senses. I'm concrete, I'm practical, I'm sequential. If you ask me how my day was, I start from the beginning, I go to the end. Okay.
You're going to get a real answer.
Yeah. So the other type is the intuitive type. The more creative type, they have what is called a sixth sense. So if I ask an intuitive how their day was, they'd say, oh, it was good. They're going to give broad brush strokes. The S is going to be extremely detail-oriented. Okay? The third preference is how you make decisions. You can either be a thinking type or a feeling type. Thinking types, or Ts, make their decisions based on their head. Logical, rational. Fs make their decisions based on their heart. So you'll see people who are Ts in what kind of careers? Law, banking, politics, business, government, scientists, construction.
Okay. Things where you have to go a long way with data before you come out with an answer?
No.
Could be,
Just
the opposite.
Just that. So you confuse the second one with the third one. Let's look at the careers for the F. What kind of careers would people go in that were Fs? Nonprofit, ministry, healthcare, counseling, teaching, healing.
Now, I think I'm confused because you were talking about how you get information.
No, this is how you make decisions.
Oh,
okay?
That's
now,
what
okay, yeah, I
happened.
jumped to the third one.
Okay.
So T's are, somebody who's a T, who's a construction worker, might make a very bad elementary school teacher.
Okay.
Okay, because there's a lot of feelings in elementary
Right.
school. I mean, if you have a kid that's breaking down in tears because they broke their pencil, the T would be like, oh, pull it together.
Right. Here's another one.
Yeah. So that's how you make decisions. The last preference is how you approach the world. You have a J or a judging type.
Mm-hmm.
Those types like structure, like to have things settled, like closure, like planning. The P's, or the perceiving types, like a spontaneous approach to life, like to keep their options open. Okay?
Would that fit with the intuitive? Or the
well,
totally
I'll tell you how they all interact. They all interact separately. Okay? So you don't want to say, oh, T's are ones that are data-driven. No.
Uh-huh.
S's are data-driven. T's make decisions based on logic and rationale. Okay? They're very logical. F's make decisions based on emotion. Emotions are not logical. Okay?
Right.
So with the last preference, the J and the P, the J is the way the world is set up. It's a planned, organized approach to life. You don't go to your dentist and say, hey, I was in the neighborhood, could I have a cleaning? That's something that's planned out. I just had my annual physical, and they gave me a physical date for next year, a year ahead. That's what
idea.
J's do. Now, P's just go with the flow. So if you ask a P, oh, what are you doing this weekend? They'd say, I don't know.
It's only Thursday.
It's only Thursday, right? Whereas Jay would say, you'd ask Jay, what are you doing this weekend? And they probably could tell you what they're doing.
All the way.
They could tell you what they're doing the entire summer. Okay. So when it comes to, this is helpful for relationships, spirituality, teamwork, but also, as we're talking about today, career choices. So there are certain types, any type can do any type of job. But there are certain types that are more suited for certain jobs. So for example, if somebody is an introvert, they can do a sales job. It's just not going to be satisfying for them.
Would they be as good? Could they be as
They
good?
could be. They could be very successful at it. But inner career satisfaction, probably not going to happen. If you have somebody that's an extrovert and you tell them you're to be a chemist and you're going to be in a lab,
Maybe 16 hours today.
it's for 16 hours. No, not good. No, not good. If you tell somebody who's a T, that is a scientist, that bases things on being rational and logical, that prefers working with logic, and then you tell them to be a counselor, where emotions are involved,
Right.
and you have to be compassionate, that's not a good
How
fit.
am I going to know what to tell them, right?
Right. So,
how
now
do you- Go
here's
ahead.
here's where I have challenges. There are, if you put all these combinations together, there's 16 Myers-Briggs types. Okay. The most common type that I see in my private practice are N's and P's, and it's how the N and the P interact with one another. You have up here S and N. Those are the opposites. So the S tends to be linear. So they pick one career and they stick with it. And then they don't think of other options outside the box. The N has lots of ideas about
Well, they may
careers.
switch every year.
Well, here's the key, is that the N has lots of ideas. If you're an N and then a P, the P is very open, doesn't like closure. So you have somebody that has a lot of ideas but never pulls the trigger. So
A parent's
that,
nightmare.
yes, and it's very frustrating to somebody who's a J. So if somebody's an SJ, they would like to say to the NP, pick one career and just do it.
But it
And then
almost
they-
sounds
they-
like some of these combinations are not good combinations.
It's not that they're not good combinations, it's just some combinations don't fit in with
So you really
the
have
9 to 5
find-
world.
Okay, you have to find your niche.
Right, so for example, somebody's an N and P, that's consulting work, that's freelance work. An NP wants to get up at 10 o'clock in the morning and work until 11 o'clock at night on their own terms. Whereas, how is the world set up? World set up 9 to 5. So they don't really fit in. So these assessments, especially the Myers-Briggs, can help create greater understanding so they can make more appropriate career choices. But, excuse me, the N and the P is the hardest one because they have so many options that are going around in their head, and then they don't make a decision. So what happens is they go into what I call career roundabout syndrome, where you go down this road, and then you go into the roundabout, and there's all these paths. And so they look at path 1, and they go, oh, that would be nice. And then they go to path 2, oh, that would be nice. And then they go around, and they just keep going around.
And I should have turned back there.
Well, yeah, and then years go by, and they're still thinking, I just want to keep my options open. Now they're 55. They're still keeping their options open. To somebody who is a J that likes closure, it's very frustrating.
So you've taken a test now. Let's say you figured out a little bit more about yourself, and how do you fit that to a job, and how do you have confidence that the whole thing was valid?
Okay. Well, that's why working with a career counselor is so important.
Yeah, because you know, you go to the internet. I took a Princeton test.
Right.
Just today to just see what it was like, and I read when doing the research that that's free. You just have to register. I found out that I'm a green and a blue, but the range of jobs was fairly large.
Well, that's why working with a career counselor is so helpful, because you need somebody to interpret these results. You can't just take the strong interest inventory, get the results, and then have an action plan after that. So you have to talk these things out and get some feedback on. That's why you also take a variety of these tests. So you're not relying on one test to control your destiny. With the Myers-Briggs, I can take the Myers-Briggs, and I have other resources that link the Myers-Briggs to appropriate careers.
Right.
Okay, so you look at all these assessments, and then you start to look for patterns over time. And that's what I do, is I take notes on every single assessment, and then I'll ask clients like, well, what do you know, of this list, what would be your favorites? And I start writing all these things down. Then I give the assessments back to the client. I make them go home for 2 weeks, reread the assessments, and come back with a top 10 list.
Okay.
Then what we do is we take the top 10 list of these jobs from the assessments, and then we prioritize them into ideal jobs, backup jobs, and then safety jobs.
Right.
And I don't make those choices for them. They make those choices. So if somebody comes to me and they say, you know, tell me what I want to be when I grow up, I'll say, actually, you're going to tell it yourself.
Right.
I'm going to pull it out of you and reflect back to you what you say and what we learn from these assessments.
Now you've dealt with a lot of people. You've
20 years worth of people.
done a lot of tests. How much have tests helped in your experience?
They help tremendously if they're used properly. Again, in our day and age, people want a silver bullet. They want to take one test online on a Saturday.
And they don't want to pay for it.
And they don't want to pay for it, and they want the heavens to open, the dove to descend, and be given the ideal job. And that's the way we look at things like Monster.com. We want to go to Monster.com, post our resume, and in the afternoon have an employer call us up and say, you're the greatest thing next to sliced bread. And it just simply doesn't work that way, any more than going to a personal trainer once is going to get you into shape. And that's why my process takes 5 to 7 weeks. And some people sign up for that, and other people are more impatient. But I tell people, it took you more than 5 to 7 weeks to get here. It's going to take some time to get out.
Now, would it be a good idea for people to go to the web and take a few of these tests just to see how they work? Or is that more dangerous?
There is a danger element. I mean, if they're not working with somebody that's professionally trained, there is a danger element. I also encourage them, if you want to do that, that's great. Bring them to me afterwards. I'm going to give you some different ones as well. The more data I have, the better off we are. So if you take some things online, plus you take the Campbell, the Strong, the Myers-Briggs, and I have this other one I can talk to you about in a second. If we take all of these and we're interpreting all the results, and then we constantly see these patterns over time, you really can't ignore that.
Right.
But if you take one test and it says, Richard Naylor should be a plumber, you kind of throw the whole thing out, but it doesn't motivate you to action to make a change. Now, the last one is called the Dictionary of Occupational Titles.
Oh, now is that a test or a library book?
It's a library book, but what I've done is I've compiled it and condensed it down to 1,700 jobs. So
it still sounds like a lot.
It's pretty much an exhaustive list of every single job in the United States. I'd probably say 95% of the jobs. So what I do is, and this requires work on my client's part, is I have them go through and highlight any job that sounds interesting. And then on the front page, I have them write the top 25. When they come to the second appointment, I have them go through the top 25 list and mark off 10. Then I compare that to the Myers-Briggs, the Campbell, the Strong, more data, and I keep seeing things over time. So that's the advantage of working with a career counselor who's trained. But I always believe my clients know inside what they really want. They do. And so it's my job to pull it out using career tests and counseling and a questionnaire and just validate them with what they already know. So sometimes clients will come to the end of the process and they'll go, oh, I knew that's what I wanted to do all along.
Really?
Yeah.
I mean, because the way I've heard you, we know some of our preferences, and we try to judge some of our abilities, but we really don't know how it all fits together.
Right, and people are complicated, too. So sometimes people just need to be validated.
And aren't there things like you do something so easily, it comes so naturally that you don't even see it. It's like you're like a fish in water. Maybe you're very extroverted and you talk to people well. You can't even imagine that it's a skill.
Right.
Or that anybody else would have trouble with that.
That's right, doing things that are effortlessly. Mm-hmm. I firmly believe if you're not doing your passion, you're trading time for dollars. Now, sometimes you can't get the ideal job. I mean, if we're living through the Great Recession, you can't get your ideal job right now, 9 times out of 10. But 5 years from now, are you striving for that job right now? Are you doing incremental things to get toward that goal? Most people don't get their ideal job because they don't have clarity on what the job is. Or they have so much negative self-talk that they really convince themselves not to do it.
So if you don't know some good targets for yourself, it's going to be hard to plan your life out.
That's right, and that's where the career tests come in. So you need to know what those targets are. And right now, maybe you're going to have your backup job. But when you know what that ideal job is, in the long term, that's where you should be putting your time and effort. But what happens a lot of times is people turn 57 years old and they knew that they wanted to do this, but they didn't take incremental steps to get there.
Sounds good. I think we've done this pretty well. Anything that we should say about it that we didn't?
I think we've pretty much covered that. You can also share these results with other people to get feedback. I often ask my clients, ask your best friend what 3 top jobs they would recommend.
That's interesting.
Ask your spouse, and I also want you to ask someone that you trust professionally. So you're constantly looking for data points.
And that could be scary for some of us, asking
Yes.
somebody else to criticize us in a way.
It's
Now,
not criticizing. It's really
I know
coming
it's
up.
not,
It's
but-
like they're looking at you from an outside perspective, and they may tell you things that they already know about you, and they're just validating you and confirming things that you already know.
Are they always honest?
Sometimes they're not, and sometimes they really don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I've had clients come in, and a guy's best friend will mention these careers, or he'll even say, I can't even go to my best friend because he's living in a completely different world.
Right. So another caveat.
Well, this process is complicated, and career tests can help, but there's no oversimplified approach. They are tools in my arsenal to help people.
And I think that the reason we're doing this is it's a very important tool
Very important.
that people should not overlook and skip.
That's right. Most people want to do step 3 first. I lose my job, I want to change jobs, I go right to the job search.
This one
They-
looks
they
good,
need
I
to
think
go
I could
back.
do it.
That's right. They need to go back, do the self-assessment, move into career exploration, and then do the action plan.
Sounds good. Thank you, Tom.
Another great show.
I agree.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And thank you for watching. Hope you learned something about career tests, that it was an interesting show, and that at least you have a great week. Take care.
Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.